Hi again, Christian Bork here. I am Executive Vice President at Leger. I manage our Eastern Canada group of researchers. And before we get going as well, I will be introducing Maryse in a few minutes, who's one of our digital experts, digital communications experts at Leger Digital. And also want to say hi to our colleagues from Central Canada and Western Canada who work with municipalities across the country on a day-to-day basis. I'll do my best to represent them as well as I can. Today, we want to talk about the City Index at Leger, where basically we track across time, across regions, and different municipalities of different sizes to enable municipalities to benchmark themselves against municipalities of the same size. What is the City Index? It's basically a tracking survey of over 60 different variables that measure perceptions, expectations, and needs of your citizens and your municipality. And what we do basically is beyond overall satisfaction with municipal services, we actually dig deep into dimensions related to public safety and security. We dive into sort of culture and cultural infrastructures in your city. We look at in the environment. We look at communications. And today, and one of the reasons why I wanted Maryse to be with me is that we will focus heavily on communicating to your citizens and how that has changed over time and what specifically we think you need to address in the short term. We also look at sports, recreation, and community activities in your city. We talk about public works, maintenance, and also waste management in your city. And finally, transportation and mobility. So those 60 variables, you can actually look at your score compared to the scores of municipalities of similar size across the country. Every year, we basically include a new 3,000 respondents to actually ensure that our benchmarks are up to date and allows you to actually sample people in your municipality and be able to see, am I doing better or worse than municipalities that are comparable in your region of the country or of similar size again? So this is what we want to talk about. We want to talk about some of the elements of the City Index. We want to focus specifically on communications and on digital communications in particular, because we do feel it is a key issue, if not the central issue right now facing municipalities across the country. But we'll also talk about the broader context within which citizens right now are asking questions about how their municipality is handling a number of key issues in their lives. One element about the current context, and we'll get into specifics in a minute, is that for the first time in modern history, we are facing sort of three comets sort of ramming into each other at unprecedented speeds, where we went from the pandemic to an economic crisis with not even a weekend of a break between the two. We went from contagion to inflation very quickly. We're also, throughout all of this, in a crisis now where the climate and climate change is having a deep impact into how Canadians feel about their future. And certainly the summer that we've had major climate-related disasters across the country, and Canadians are feeling it. What this is leading into is basically no less than a mental health crisis across the country. Right now, if you are a Canadian that doesn't feel a hint of anxiety about something, I don't know where you come from, because we're all feeling sort of this sentiment that something is not going right now in our country. When we focus on the pandemic, and why do we still focus on the pandemic in a way, is that the pandemic and the sort of months and year that followed basically led to a very rapid acceleration of trends that were already existing before the pandemic. It's not like COVID created something in Canada. It basically just accelerated what was actually already going on. People were moving to online shopping before the pandemic, but then again, the pandemic basically accelerated that trend. Working from home was something that was already starting before the pandemic, again, for reasons we all know and understand, accelerated that trend that is still going on today across the country. And the same about mental health issues. We are, as Canadians, more fragile than we were before this pandemic started. And we will see differences again across generations as how financial anxiety is playing into this. Also, climate anxiety is also feeding into this growing concern of Canadians that something is not going right. Um, After the pandemic, because of supply chain issues, of course, we all understand the climate of unprecedented inflation that we are facing today. And along with inflation comes increased interest rates at the very same time. And those two things don't really mesh all that well in the minds of Canadians. And as well, we are facing from coast to coast a crisis in terms of the cost of housing. Affordability is the number one issue right now in Canada, and Canadians are right for feeling that this should be the main priority of their governments, regardless of the level of government as well.
I'm sorry, Christian. Did you mean to share your screen?
Oh, I don't know why the sharing actually stopped.
There
Sorry
you
about
are.
that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for reminding me. So basically, again, what we've seen is that the pandemic did start something, and it's still going on today. Um, and we wanted to summarize that in terms of 5 key trends that we think, in a way, should be keeping you up at night. What are those 5 trends? We were already talking a little bit about how the pandemic and what came soon after with rising inflation, cost of housing, again, being a crisis across the country. We are feeling and we are in an era where financial anxiety is actually something that is key to understanding Canadians today. Right now in this country, 51% of working Canadians say they are living from paycheck to paycheck. That sort of buffer zone, that little extra that we were putting aside to make us feel comfortable, for a lot of Canadians, that does not exist anymore. And when we actually measured, we decided with the United Way, we came up with a financial anxiety index where right now 85% of Canadians are feeling some form or another of financial anxiety, including 43% of Canadians where that level of anxiety to us in terms of how we calculate this is actually severe in that right now close to 1 in 2 Canadians are losing sleep, feeling sadness when they actually look at their financial statements, and other forms of financial anxiety, which right now are having a deep impact on how we are or feeling mentally as Canadians. 59% of Canadians already believe that we are in a recession, even though most economists would say, oh, it might be coming up in early 2024. But already Canadians are feeling, and again, is it the reality that we are in a recession? As pollsters, we don't really care all that much. It's the perception that we are in a recession that actually matters to us. So Canadians are already there. And when we ask them, over the next 12 months, do you feel that your economic situation, personal financial situation will improve, stay the same, or get worse? 37% of Canadians believe things will get worse. 44 believe anyway that they will be doing as well as they are doing now in 12 months, but they already feel pretty negative about the situation they're in right now. Only 19% of Canadians believe that their personal finances will improve in the next year. From that perspective, again, we need to look at how Canadians are truly feeling about this. When we actually look, do you have more or less savings than you used to a year ago? We have 53% of Canadians who are saying, I had to dig into my savings. During the pandemic, what was nice in 2020 and 2021, Canadians actually were able, on average, to reduce their overall debt load because we were not basically spending our money as we used to before the pandemic. But all of those sort of little savings that we actually were able to put aside in 2021 and even early into 2022, all that's now sort of disappeared, and more Canadians are actually saying, I'm saving less and less money at the moment. When we actually asked about their debt, again, we see that 44% say my debt load will be similar over the next year. 30% expect that their debt will actually grow over the next year, and 26 believe that they can actually reduce their debt. But if you look in that data in greater detail, most who say that they will have less debt in a year from now are usually over the age of 55, if not the age of 65. But for younger Canadians, Gen Z, millennials, and even Gen Xers, the situation is they fear they will get into greater debt over the next 12 months. One of the impacts of this is actually they will tend to transpose their personal feelings about their personal finances to the different levels of government. When we ask them, how do you feel about how your city is actually managing its spending? 28% say, my city is doing a good job at managing its finances. 42% say they're not doing a good job. They're actually doing a fairly poor job at managing their own spending. 30% say they do not know or prefer not to answer the question. But actually, that 42% who say my city is not managing its finances very well, these are people that will be vocal on social media, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. So the sentiment is, as we are facing a tough economy, that basically the way we manage public finances will actually reflect that. And even worse, a third of Canadians believe that I'm sure that some municipal officials or elected officials or non-elected officials are actually corrupt. So this feeling that we should be fearful, that we should in a way be somewhat more cynical than we used to about our local officials is actually very present in Canadians' minds. If Canadians are feeling sort of the pinch in terms of rising housing costs and of course inflation and everything else in their lives being sort of costing more than it used to before the pandemic, there will be extremely little and very limited wiggle room to increase municipal taxes over the next year. Now, we actually asked them, and this is a very soft question, and we did that on purpose, because if we ask, do you think your city should raise your taxes? 110% of the sample would have said no. But what we wanted to know is there a little bit of flexibility in people's minds? And when you said, considering the municipal services you are receiving right now in your city, would you say that your level of taxation is acceptable or unacceptable? And already we see that Canadians are divided in almost two equal halves. 45% say, it's still acceptable. So these are the people where you can say, you know, for X and Y reasons, we may need to increase your municipal taxes a bit further. But for 43% of Canadians, already they're feeling that their level of taxation at the local level is unacceptable. So again, because of the current economic context, the willingness of Canadians to accept increases in local taxes is actually very low. And one thing that we see throughout the data in the municipal index is the smaller the city or municipality, the better you are in terms of perceptions of Canadians. We see that there's a little bit more flexibility when you actually look at smaller cities of 25 to 50,000 residents, and even among cities with a population less than 100,000. But as soon as you move into larger cities across the country, this is where we see that the level of acceptability of increases, potential increases in local taxes, actually gets lower and lower. There are some differences across regions of Canada, but we prefer to highlight differences based on the size of municipality, because usually those differences are actually more important than what we find in differences between Alberta, BC, Alberta, Quebec, and so forth. Again, all of this context right now, mostly related to our financial anxiety and the affordability crisis that we're going through, is that citizens are, to put it mildly, they are angry. Angry for a series of reasons, and angry at everybody that's making decisions about their lives around them. We sort of see that in the results as well. And perceptions, and these are the main dimensions of the city index. Public safety, we're still doing okay. With a score of 7.1 out of 10, we can say we are in the somewhat satisfied sort of end of the spectrum. Cultural infrastructures in the city, we're at 6.9. We keep going down. 6.7 when it comes to sport and recreation and infrastructures in the city. But actually, when you get into public works, maintenance of the city, waste management, we're getting down to the 6.5, 6.3 when it comes to transportation and mobility. So there's no actual dimension of our municipal services where Canadians actually give their city fairly high marks. Again, this will vary depending on the size of municipality, but already we see that people are fairly critical of municipal services in their city. Look here at overall satisfaction with service quality in your municipality. We're barely getting sort of a passing grade from Canadians. Overall, 6 out of 10. This is not a figure that we want. This is not the figure that you think you deserve. Probably you're doing a great job at managing municipal services in your city, but then again, perception rarely matches reality when we ask Canadians about elected officials and governments. But in this particular case, they are being very critical of their of the management of their municipality. Again, if you're in a smaller city or municipality, you're doing better. You're in the 6.6, 6.4. Already that's not all that high. But as soon as you move into the larger cities, for a city of over 2,050 residents, that drops to 5.8. So again, we are seeing people right now are very critical. They're angry for a host of reasons. And right now they're willing to take it out on whoever they can. If you look at, and we focus specifically on the performance of the mayor, well, then the rating is actually even lower at 5.5. And if we look at larger municipalities, again, we're in around that 5.5, 5.4 score, which again probably suggests, and we'll see further evidence of that a little bit later on, is that right now, all incumbents at all levels of government, not only in Canada, but pretty much everywhere, are actually struggling right now. Again, angry citizens will take it out on their elected officials. That's what we have to deal with. From the federal Liberal Party that's in trouble right now when we do our polling, and all premiers across the country are having a tougher time in terms of approval ratings. We've tested it with a number of large cities where we see, again, incumbents struggling. Biden is struggling against Donald Trump if the presidential election was happening tomorrow. And we see, again, that the willingness of Canadians to say something's wrong, it must be somebody else's fault. And right now, the potential is that they will be taking it out on you. Actually, our team, our Western Canadian team of researchers, next week will be publishing a survey of the approval rating of mayors of major cities in Western Canada. And if I was a betting man, I would bet that probably the mayors of Vancouver, Surrey, Calgary, Edmonton are having a tougher go in terms of getting positive marks from their citizens. We looked at managing public transportation and managing transportation and traffic generally in the city. These, again, are indicators that are part of the index, and look at whenever it comes to traffic flow and mobility within the city and traffic management. Again, scores are fairly low. We're doing better when it comes to bike paths and actual sort of being sort of actively sort of mobile in our city. But when it comes to specific dimensions of transportation, we see again that it's tough to get the passing grade. The same when we look at actually snow removal and maintenance of the city streets. Look at the grades we actually get as municipalities when it comes to snow removal on the sidewalks, on streets, and even with maintenance of the streets and sidewalks during the nicer seasons. We're in the 5 point something and in and around 6 out of 10, which is actually fairly low. So regardless of where you are in the country, right now, it's again tougher to get positive feedback from citizens. When we wanted to focus in the index this year on what are the main priorities when it comes to what your city should be focusing on, number one, housing affordability. 47% actually of Canadians pick that as one of the three main priorities for their municipal government. Are we surprised? No. Would we have gotten that 4 years ago? No. Again, this is a trend that's actually been increasing across the country. We looked at data in terms of household budgets in the country. And if you look at 2019, prior to the pandemic, to 2023, the actual amount of money people pay basically just to have a roof over their heads has almost doubled, which basically means that your discretionary spending in your household across the country is actually very limited today. So housing affordability is the number one issue. But again, at the municipal level of government, you don't have necessarily all of the capacity to actually impact this specific dimension. We're to somewhat rely on our provincial governments or the federal government to help us in that capacity. But right now, again, housing affordability is the number one issue for Canadians when it comes to what their municipal government should be focusing on. Second is infrastructures, roads, sidewalks. That's always been there, but it used to be the number one concern of Canadians when it came to their municipality. It's a distant number two now. And one other dimension that keeps growing and growing in Canada since the pandemic is how do we handle the issues of poverty, homelessness, and mental health issues that are plaguing our cities. It used to be that dimension was very present in the very large cities, the top 10 cities across the country, but now homelessness, poverty and the mental health crisis is moving into smaller municipalities across the country. And for a lot of municipalities, this is something new that they've had to manage since 2022. If we add on top of that the opioid crisis that we are seeing across the country, more and more Canadians want to know, how is my municipality handling these key core issues for me? We actually see that property tax now is in fifth place at 24%. It's not that property tax is not important, of course, and in the context we are living in, it is extremely important. But the fact is that affordability and managing homelessness, mental health and poverty in our cities now actually is more important than property taxes, actually means something. It is a shift in how Canadians are actually talking and thinking about their cities. It used to be, how much am I paying for the snow to be removed on my street? That was basically it. But now managing a city is a lot more complex than it used to be. Another key measure, and this is used, the NPS score, the Net Promoter Score, is something that is used across all industry sectors, where we basically look at what is the percentage of my population that would actually recommend me to a close friend or a family member. And it's actually a measure of, and it's a predictor of loyalty to brands and to services that people will actually want to pay for. But it is also used in measuring satisfaction with different levels of government. In the current context, what we have right now is 44% of the people living in your city could be considered as detractors. They give you a score of 0 to 6 out of 10 in terms of, would I recommend a family member or a close friend to move to my city? We have 36% of the population that could be considered as neutrals. They give you a score, positive score of 7 out of 8, but in the theory behind the Net Promoter Score, with a score of 7 or of 8, there are sort of doubts that you would actually go to the extent of recommending your city to a close one. And we only today have 18% of ambassadors, those who give you great scores of 9 or 10 out of 10, which gives right now, on average, municipalities across the country of a negative 26 NPS score, which is not what we want. And from measures we've had in the past, there's a dramatic decline in NPS scores across the country over the past 2 years. One element that we've seen, of course, and that was accelerated through the pandemic, was the fact that this sort of buy local and invest in your community is actually on the rise. And 62% of Canadians today say that they actually pay more attention to buying local as in what's coming from their actual regions. Because of supply chain issues as well, we are seeing that governments want to pay more attention to how they can develop internal markets within the country. This to us, we'll mention in a moment, appears as an opportunity when it comes to sort of talking about your city and talking about what your municipality can do to improve the quality of life of Canadians. But this is a trend, again, that we should focus on. And one of the reasons why this is more important, and we've seen a shift over the past couple of years, is that today still 43% of Canadians, working Canadians, work at least part of the week from their home. Now, this is not moving. This sort of trend towards going back to the office right now is at a standstill in the country when we measure it across time. But what this is saying is that those days that they actually work from home, they actually want to live in their city. They actually want to spend money in their neighborhoods. They want to reinvest in their actual neighborhood that they live in. This is both an opportunity, but as well, it's sort of a growing or growing expectations of Canadians that they can spend more time in their neighborhood than they used to. Is their neighborhood adapting? Is the offer of, in terms of having those little coffee shops and little sort of shops where they can actually spend some of their time, is that present? It used to be a few years back that if you were living in a suburban city across Canada, you would basically leave in the morning, come back at night, and basically you were using that city to sleep in. Now you actually are working in that suburban community. Now we're getting into what we believe is sort of the crux of what we want to present today. In the current context, I know I've been maybe sounding a bit negative. So this is where we think we need to shift the conversation because again, we need to do something about how Canadians are expressing views about how their governments are managing their top priorities. And we wanted to introduce and wanted to be sure we get at the issue of how do we handle the fact that Canadians today are communicating through very different channels than they used to just a few years back. And this is why I want to bring Maryse into the conversation. Of course, you probably know Léger as a market research, public opinion market research firm in the country where we do a lot of market research studies in different area sectors. We have specialized studies on, reputation and managing sort of customer satisfaction in the retail space. We do a lot of customer experience work as well. But now we've added, and this is where Léger Digital, which is a digital communications and marketing firm that lives inside of Léger, can actually bring us this whole sort of new dimension of how we can bring our data to drive key strategic recommendations in terms of how do we communicate with our customers, but again, as well, to our citizens. So I'll turn it over to Maryse. She's going to present you some key data on social media and digital communications in the city, and also will offer her recommendations in terms of what we can do in this very tough context that we are facing. So over to you, Maryse.
Thank you, Christian. From a silent majority to a loud minority. These numbers here show what we mean by a loud minority. So 13% have commented negatively about their city's administration, and 12% have shared negative comments. But why do we say loud? Because negative comments tend to generate engagement through responses, reactions, and shares, and engaging comments are favored by the algorithm. They are prone to be shown more often to more people. This is why social media management is not easy, especially for a municipality. Your job is hard, but we'll show you that there are solutions. So a high proportion think the criticisms of their city and officials are true. When asked what they think about the criticism they read online about their city and its administration, 35% will say that they believe it is true. If people are exposed to strong opinions online and they believe them to be the truth, they might interact with this kind of content more and be more and more exposed to it, transforming their social media feed into an echo chamber. This is why it's important to have the right tools and strategies to rapidly redirect the conversation and correct what needs to be corrected. If you don't, your municipality's reputation basically is on the line. So frequency of social media use. On the left, as shown here, the majority of people use social media to get information about their municipality. These platforms are essential to you. They are basically the doorway to connecting with your citizens. On the right, not only do people follow you directly on social media, but they also regroup on their own by creating Facebook groups where they can discuss their city's important matters, like Spotted or neighborhood groups. This is why you cannot have full control on of the online communication of your citizens, and that's fine. What matters is to have a good understanding of the platforms that you use, of the dynamics of the conversation happening around your municipality. So we need to put in place the tools that will help you understand what's going on and what is being said inside of those groups. Moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, as you can see, 12% of people have contacted their municipality through social media, and out of those, 34% find that the response time is lacking. This shows the importance of being present online for one, but mostly of being proactive in anticipating questions and reactive in your response time. Facebook users usually expect a response within 4 hours. I know, 4 hours. We often see organizations that are full of good intentions and are present on social media platforms, but they don't actively maintain their presence. When that happens, you're not in control of the narrative, as it can be taken over by the loud minority of users. So as you can see here, almost 1 out of 2 citizens are unsatisfied with their elected officials' responsiveness. But thankfully, your social media platforms put you on the front lines. Use them to get a feel of your population instantly. Social media is also the best way to show your citizens you are listening, but not only are you listening, you can react quickly. You can post instantly, which is way faster than making a press release or a website article. So going to the next slide, let's talk about the priorities for municipal digital communication. The 2 priorities competing for the #1 spot at 27% are first to improve the relevance of shared content. This is crucial. To have the right message on the right platform, in the right format, at the right time. All of this can be determined in advance with a solid content strategy. And here at Léger Digital, we also developed with our colleagues at research a unique solution that we call the Voice of the Community, where we poll your social media followers on their opinion, and we give you tangible recommendations to help you update your content strategy. The following priority was response time. We went over this earlier. The third priority is being present on more platforms. This insight might have been influenced by Gen Z. As we know, they are moving away from Facebook. But what this tells us is that before launching an Instagram page or a TikTok account, you need to take the time to determine what role each platform will play for you, depending on your key messages and your audiences, mostly. So the solution is not one size fits all. We recommend a personalized approach to developing your social media content strategy. And here on the right, you see that the preferred source of information is the city's official website. Next up are neighbors. And then we're back to digital communications through official social media and newsletter. So this brings us back to using different methods and platforms to communicate with your citizens. And all of this should be considered when planning your communication. So your 3 big challenges. Your first challenge is that the majority of citizens never published a positive comment regarding their municipality. That being said, negative comments and criticism from the loud minority can be shared and can circulate. Your second challenge is that if you do not have a proper strategy nor the tools to counteract viral negative comments and such, you risk losing control of the narrative on your own platforms, on your own pages. This can contribute to the loss of trust from your population and can feed into disinformation. So the game plan is to put the tools and a strategy in place to allow you to be reactive on social media and take back control of your key messages as much as possible. So finally, a recommendation. First off, I know it's hard, but please don't take it personally. Remember that the most negative stuff often comes from a minority of people. Next, equip and train your teams. You can do that with audits, strategies, and training. You can help your team become proactive and reactive on your social media. If you don't want anything to go off the rails, you need to actively maintain your social media. As a side note, we're aware that some cities have decided to ban or refrain from using ads on Meta and such, but here we're talking about community management and we're talking about public posts and private messaging. People are still going to go on your page and are still going to interact with you on Facebook. Manage the conversation. So give your community managers the tools to moderate the conversation. Your Facebook page is your Facebook page. You are allowed to decide the rules. You can ban a user if they don't follow your etiquette. And finally, consolidate a network of ambassadors and allies. So you can build your own network with your close allies to help spread the important and the more positive messages online. That way we can counteract the viral negative comments if you're supported by a network of ambassadors. One quick word for a solution. Remember that you will never have full control of the communications online. So don't worry about it. You have to navigate in an imperfect environment and you can help your team do so more purposefully.
Thank you, Maryse. Maryse will be available as well in the Q&A portion of the webinar in a few minutes. So if you have questions more specifically about digital communications in your city, please drop a line in the Q&A at the bottom, and Maryse will be happy to answer your questions. The neat thing about the solutions that are offered by Léger Digital as well is, given that municipalities that may be a bit smaller do not necessarily have a ton of budget, for a very, very decent investment, as Maryse pointed out, we can do a digital audit of your city communications and your social media strategy as well, help you develop that strategy moving forward, develop training and tools for your staff who are involved in your social media communications. And as well, we can offer other services in terms of activation, support, and sort of growing a network of ambassadors in your city. So again, please feel free to contact us if this is an area of managing your city that you feel you might need some of our help. So thank you for that, Maryse. And one of the reasons why we need to communicate better, and because of the context we are in, is right now, people want change. When the pandemic hit us in 2020, I would have said the exact opposite. People want stability. But 3 years later, because of the context that we are in now, they want the opposite. I was mentioning earlier on that sort of the general rule is that incumbents are suffering right now when it comes to their approval ratings. We see it here as well. If there were in the next municipal election, do you want your current team to stay in place, or would you like to see a new team lead your community? 27% of Canadians right now are saying, I want the team in place right now to stay. 42% want that team of municipal leaders to change in the next municipal election. A third of people are sort of in that sort of don't know, wait and see type of attitude. But usually when you're a wait and see attitude, it's because you fail to have positive predispositions towards the administration right now in your city. So all of this negativity, again, Canadians are angry, and we cannot fault them. And again, this leads them to say something needs to change. Whoops, sorry. However, we believe that even though we're facing sort of, these 5 key trends that we think should keep you up at night, there are solutions, there are answers. When it comes to financial anxiety, municipalities basically need to be more transparent when it comes to their management of public finances and what it means for Canadians in terms of their property taxes. The more we communicate efficiently and the more we are open and transparent, the more we can actually have an impact on Canadians' financial anxiety. When we talked about angry citizens, it's basically we need to communicate better. It's very hard for Canadians to feel that their city officials are actually committed to them if they don't feel a sense of empathy coming from their municipality. And the only way to transmit that sort of message of empathy, that we understand it's a tough time for Canadians, the only way we can do that is through more and better and more efficient communications. This sort of aspect of living local, of reinvesting in your neighborhood that we are seeing since the pandemic, I think this is a unique opportunity for municipalities to be sort of that gateway to promote local entrepreneurs and local companies and organizations who are actually making a difference in people's lives. Cities need partners, and they need to feature those partners. And we believe this is a true opportunity for Canadian municipalities. Fourth, when we were talking about artificial unintelligent, is basically when you look, and Marie's just mentioned it, don't take it too personally. Again, sort of take a deep breath and then focus on how you can better train your staff, how you can better develop a digital strategy that would actually lead to tangible, measurable results in the future. And of course, we can help you in that regard. And if Canadians want change, then basically it's up to you to represent that change and take ownership moving forward. And again, in a very difficult context. We usually like to say that if you feel 2023 was rock and roll, we think 2024 will be heavy metal. So thank you for paying attention to both of us. And thank you, Maryse, again, for sharing your insights. We do have a little time. We will try to finish before 1 o'clock Eastern time, because we want to give you a little bit of time before you head into your next meeting. But please drop your questions in the Q&A, and we will get to them. Actually, here. Oh, somebody says, I find the results to be surprising and on officials being corrupt. Were these results from a statistically valid sample or from a convenience sample? And if so, how was it weighted? Yeah, I can address that very quickly. It's a representative sample of the Canadian population, 18 plus, that would be able to vote in their municipality. We weighted the sample according to all sort of Statistics Canada variables that we had by region, by first language learned at birth, by size of the household, level of education, level of income, and all of the key variables to ensure that we had a representative sample of Canadians. Of course, it's not true that 29% of city officials are corrupt. That's certainly true, but to us, the importance is to measure the intensity of the emotion right now that Canadians are feeling. And to us, the main measure was the level of that perception being present. And again, a reflection of sort of the angst felt by many Canadians out there. But it was a representative sample of adult Canadians from coast to coast. Now, I see one other question as well, where they asked, and again, this is more to Maryse, our cities actually sort of, we are now banning Meta and its platform because of their response to our federal legislation, of course. What can we still do, or how do we go about our social media strategy in the current context of the ban of using Meta advertising?
Thank you, Christian, for the question. Yeah, that's very interesting, because even though we can't use ads in the context of a municipality, the Meta ads, like really putting money in the platform, your page is still there and people are still going to need information from you. There's still other ways that don't involve paying Meta to share information with your citizens. There's organic posting, just to post. There's Facebook events, there's Facebook groups, and there are even other platforms if you still really want to do ads. There's LinkedIn, there's Google. So we've been very creative with the municipalities we've worked with in finding ways to promote stuff or to share information, but people are still on Facebook, and it's still very relevant to use.
Perfect, thank you. Two questions that are relevant, that are more about the city index itself. First one, do you have an overall ranking of the city index? The way the index is designed And with the size of the sample that we are using, what we wanted is to have a benchmark where municipalities can actually compare themselves to a national benchmark of municipalities of similar size. So we cannot say Calgary is doing better than Edmonton, or Mississauga is doing better than Oakville, because again, that would demand that we would have tens of thousands of respondents in the study. So basically, we wanted to offer the city index in when your city considers sort of polling their local population, we can then actually check that information against what we have in our database to see to what extent or how you are comparable to cities of similar size or cities within the same province as well. So this is more what the city index was designed to do. Somebody mentions, and I wanted to mention it at the end, but I think you are right in mentioning it now. Because you were at this webinar, we will send you the actual full deck that we actually used in the presentation today. So you will receive it, you'll be able to review it. Of course, if ever you have any questions or comments, please contact. We have 7 offices across Canada. Contact your local Léger office across the country, and we can actually sort of go through and answer those questions with you moving forward. So again, the city index is there basically to offer the capacity to benchmark your city against similar municipalities across Canada, in the hope that this provides an extra layer of analysis when you actually look at how you are doing in your own city. I'm just going through here. Okay, somebody asked us specific questions about the NPS score. The NPS is the Net Promoter Score, is a standard measure used in the market research industry over the past almost 20 years now. And basically, it is one question where we ask people on a scale from 0 to 10 to what extent they would recommend, in this case, to a family member or a close friend, recommend living in that city. Just like we would use it if you would recommend your brand of smartphone to a friend or a family member. So people are put on a scale from 0 to 10, provide their answers, and they are recoded in the theory of the Net Promoter Score, basically again as detractors giving a score from 0 to 6, neutrals giving a score of 7 to 8, and then those actually considered ambassadors are giving a score of 9 or 10 out of 10. So it's basically the same measure that is used. It's sort of a standard that we reproduce. Of course, when we use it to look at how they evaluate organizations that are sort of in the public sphere, that are not private corporation brands or retail operations, for example, we don't expect NPS scores to be as high. So the fact that the NPS score is to some extent negative here is not all that surprising, because of course, if you ask people to, on the same scale, to evaluate their car or their smartphone and compare that to their city, of course, the challenges and the complexity of managing a city is very different from the experience they have with their car or with their smartphone. The most important thing, though, is that we used to see NPSs in municipalities to be barely positive or in and around the sort of the 0 mark. It's the fact that they are declining over the past 2 years that I think is a greater concern to us than anything else. Again, one other question. All of the slides that you have seen today will be shared with you. They will be sent this afternoon as a thank you for being present at our webinar. And well, 12:50, so we Eastern time, we'll be able to give you sort of a quick few minutes break before you head in or back to work in about 10 minutes. I wanted to thank you. Thank you, Maryse, for sharing your insights on digital communications. Wish you all the best. And even though the context is very tough, it's basically just time to work even harder and see how these numbers may improve and hopefully improve over the next couple of years. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.